properties. There we go. What is happening? What is that? Oh, there we go. All right. Thanks for pointing that out. I really appreciate that. You can hear me now. No sound. Thanks. All right, guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Great. So we are on the first 100 days on this Trump administration. We are 100 days in and counting, and we are going to absolutely just take a look at everything that is happening as of late. The Trump administration is moving fast and rapidly, and we are talking a big game here. Can't hear you, goofball. Oh, well, no, that's an old comment. All right, let's get back into what we were talking about. So these first 100 days, Larry, I guess my name is Larry. I'm not really sure the reference there. And so here we go. You voted for Trump. I sure did too. And things are looking on the upside. What do you guys think about the first 100 days of Trump's administration? Are things going in your favor? Do you think things are headed in a good direction? Or do you think things are going to completely fall apart at some point or another? Are we looking at a catastrophic failure later down the line? Or are we looking at a competent government that is doing its job, that is turning things around? What do you think? And so from that point on, when we have everything that's happening around the world, the Pope passed away. Israel and Iran, there is just feud after feud. The U.S. constantly attack. Or actually, it's been, I think, over 60 days that they've been attacking Yemen. They've cut wasteful spending. Absolutely. I wish we had him in the UK. Gosh, I'm sure things are going so crazy in that region right now. Tell me what's going on. What is the thing? What are the major things happening, Paul, in the UK as to why you want him over there? What are some of the things that are happening on your front? Because I'm completely oblivious to that, if that's even the right word to use. Securing the border. Yeah. Border has been secured. This is the most secure the border has been. And he's still under the threshold of deportations from the Barack Obama administration, Clinton, I think, and Ronald Reagan. These presidents had the highest deportations during their administration. And Trump is at 1.3, I believe. And so, loss of control of the borders. Wow. You know what's crazy? This is something that I really kind of brushed off my shoulders, but things have come to light as of recent. And this is in regards to Islam taking over and populating regions, putting themselves into, these are Muslims, putting themselves into power, places of power, right? Governors, mayors, whatever. Judges. It happened here in America. There's a Muslim judge touting his Muslim sort of, his Islamic self. In London, there's a I don't want to get this wrong. Maybe Paul, if you know anything about this, UK has been invaded. Paul, if you know anything about this, about a ban on Christianity, where you can't preach the gospel or you'll be arrested. Vet me on that. And so there is what's possibly happening in that region in London. Let me know, Paul. Update me on that. The borders most certainly are not secure. And in the UK, as mentioned by Paul. And we are there's pockets, right? Texas is now being infiltrated by Islamic fundamentalism. And there was a video of a Republican woman who went up, and she was actually wearing a head covering, and she crashed a Muslim gathering, Islamic, I don't know, I think, what would you call it? A gathering of people that were on, I think, the Capitol or something like that. And this is from Breitbart News. You can probably see that clip there. If I can find it sometime during the stream, I'll find that. But basically, she went over and she grabbed a hold of the mic. She started talking and she was saying a bunch of stuff. I couldn't really understand what she was saying, but they kicked her out. And then the camera pans around and you see all these women, these men that are there, these women that are wearing head coverings, and it's just crazy. So, Paul, you say no particular ban on Christianity, basically calling it speech that will create disturbance. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right. These things will escalate. There's a video of a guy. Oh, man. Boy, if I had this clip. He's basically on a talk show, and it's this Muslim guy. I think he migrated over to the UK, and he was talking about the fact that, oh man, this is going to be, okay, you say twisting existing laws to repress Christianity. Yeah, that sounds about right. I've got to find this clip for you guys because this will be super eye-opening, and this was from years ago. So I don't even know if I'm going to be able to find this. You know what? Grok's going to help me out here. See if Grok can pull this up for me. But otherwise, Mike Waltz is out. This is something that we just, breaking news as a few days ago. China is still, not backing down from these tariffs. Iran is a big problem right now. We are not able to negotiate or come to a final negotiation with Iran. There has been a new mineral deal agreement with Ukraine. And Zelenskyy doesn't shut his mouth. He's been talking on X. Yeah, breaking news came out a few days ago. Yeah, it's breaking news for anybody who hasn't heard it. Maybe. But yeah, stuff that has been recent, I say, I guess that's what I'm talking about. Recent in the last 2 to 3 days, 4 days, week or so. This stuff is interesting coverage, but what else am I missing here? The Pope dying. That in and of itself is a whole different ball game on who's going to step in, who's really going to lead the charge. They're saying that they want to put somebody like a Trump in that position, right? Where he's more conservative or leans right. They don't know who that's going to be, but there could be somebody who's even worse than that. Somebody who's even more anti-Semitic, somebody who is, a lot more favor with maybe a little bit more of a sort of appearance, or it's not the word I'm going for, but seems like he has more authority with the scriptures. And so when we look at the Pope and all that stuff, who's going to step in? I have no idea. Have you guys heard anything about who might be stepping in? I just saw just a little news snippet of a certain I don't know, we wouldn't call him a bishop, but let's see if I can find it here on the news tab. We'll go to some clips here in just a moment. And yeah, I'm not going to find it. It's already gone. So Mike Waltz is out. Let me look for a clip that I want to show you about this guy from the UK talking on a talk show. Talks about basically if you go against a certain belief, then his judges will basically, I don't know. He doesn't say it, but he implies murder or death, rather, death penalty for the guy. So I'm going to play this clip from Charlie Kirk talking about Mike Waltz out. Mike Waltz is out. Let's get that stream over. And we'll talk about that right now.
The editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, and we never got a really good answer of how that happened. One of the excuses was, well, he saved his contacts with Jeffrey Goldberg, and then he wasn't sure who he was adding and why he was there and what was going on. And it's just, we're not exactly completely clear, or let's just say, certain why that happened. Now, Mike Waltz, after the attacks that happened in Yemen, the Houthi attacks, he famously sent the knuckle and emoji with the American flag and the fire symbol. Now, Mike Waltz and I had a fine relationship. He knew that we had significant disagreements, and that's what I really want to emphasize and mention here, is that Mike Waltz and his deputy, Alex Wong, represented a neoconservative view of foreign policy. Now, what is a neoconservative view of foreign policy? Well, neoconservatism is actually a outgrowth of Marxism from the 1940s and 50s, which it is a Trotskyite, Stalinist way of viewing the world, which is that we are going to expand the state to such great lengths, and we're going to bring American values by force to the rest of the world. The architects of the Iraq War, the architects of the Vietnam War, and mind you, yesterday was the 50-year anniversary of the fall of Saigon. Neoconservatives brought us into Vietnam, and so it is actually very fitting that a neoconservative falls the day after Saigon fell.
Yeah, so the clip that I want to show you, I found it. This is wild because this is a guy by the name of I'm gonna mess up the name here. I'm gonna butcher it big time, but it's Majid Nawaz. Mehdi Hassan and Mo Ansar lock horns on BBC Newsnight. This is 11 years ago. This might be the clip here. Let me see here. Let me transfer this over to so you guys can see it.
Well, a number of Muslim commentators declined to take part in this debate as they didn't want to share a platform with Majid Nawaz, the author of that piece, who joins me now, along with the political director of the Huffington Post UK, Mehdi Hassan, and the Muslim community activist Mo Ansar. You're not going to sit there and say that you didn't expect people to be offended when you tweeted that cartoon.
Well, I think the point I was making was that I wasn't offended, Jeremy, and that's on my personal Twitter timeline. I think that's a very fair point to make.
But you knew people would be offended when it went out there.
I think some people would be offended. I can't speak for the 2.7 million Muslims that are in the UK, nor can I speak for the 1.5 billion Muslims across the world. The petition that was set up only gained 1% of this country's Muslims as signatures. So I think it's fair to say that actually most Muslims weren't bothered by it.
You knew what you did was offensive to
some
many people. Some people.
Yeah, 1% of this country's 1% of this country's Muslims signed a petition asking for my deselection in Hampstead and Kilburn. And there are 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. That petition was sent out across the world and only gained 20,000 signatures. So I've got to say that actually it's not a majority. Some Muslims were offended, but also as a Muslim, I have the right to say I wasn't offended. But actually, what are they offended by? They were offended by my lack of offence.
But you knew people would be offended by it.
Some people, yes.
Yeah. No answer. What could you possibly find to be upset about in that card?
Freedom and democracy is absurd.
This is it, guys. This is it. Check this out. This guy here, Anjem. If you've never heard of Anjem, he actually is very, very dangerous. Here we go.
Well, we're joined now by Anjem Chowdhury of Islam for UK and by Majid Nawaz from the counter-extremism think tank, the Quilliam Foundation. I see in your statement...
So this is, this is one of UK's most notorious radical clerics, has been convicted of inviting others to support so-called Islamic State. And this is the interview from their archives from January 2010, right? This is what you are seeing sort of manifesting in the UK as of right now. I mean, this goes to your point, Paul. Check this out. You got to watch this. I hope you're still here.
Today, that this decision, in your judgment, is a victory for Islam and for Muslims. How does that work?
Well, absolutely, because if you believe in something, then it should be good for all times and places. The government advocate democracy and freedom. Supposedly, their own soldiers are dying for freedom and democracy in Afghanistan. And yet, when we expose their foreign policy, as we did with the mere suggestion of having a procession in Wooden Basset, suddenly you find that freedom dissipates and you have dictatorship.
And how's the campaign to move Britain over to Sharia law coming along?
Well, this is in the hands of God. We do our best to propagate Islam. Well, of course it is.
We do our best to propagate Islam, right? Just pay attention to his wording. Pay attention to what he's saying. This gets very interesting in just a moment. Watch.
I think many people will see that democracy and freedom is no good for the British, no good for Afghanistan, and in fact...
Democracy and freedom are no good for the British. So they want to implement Islam.
We need an
okay, let me go back.
This is in the hands of God. We do our best to propagate Islam. Well, of course it is. I think many people will see that democracy and freedom is no good for the British, no good for Afghanistan, and in fact, we need an alternative. Unlike man-made law, the Sharia is not something which gives you a right today to take it away tomorrow. It's good in all times and places.
What is
Siri, to make this an issue of freedom and democracy is absurd. Anjem, you haven't had a hair on your body touched by this government or this country. You haven't spent a day in prison. You haven't suffered one bit for your views. You're allowed to sit here right now because of freedom and democracy in your so-called caliphate. You'd have me killed, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you have me? Am I an apostate that deserves death?
Silent. He's silent. In your apostate, you would have me killed.
Prison. You haven't suffered one bit for your views. You're allowed to sit here right now because of freedom and democracy in your so-called caliphate. You'd have me killed, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you have me? Am I an apostate that deserves death?
Well, I mean, obviously, Majid Nawaz is part of an apostate organisation called the Quilliam Foundation. He's paid by Alan Johnson and Gordon Brown to say what he's saying.
And
So
John,
I'm
how
not
many
surprised.
thousands of pounds a year do you get on benefits?
This man gets
How many thousands
£2
of
million
pounds a year? What's it?
with his and his organisation in order to fight against Islam or Muslims.
Look, he's asked you two questions. Firstly, under your caliphate, he would be executable, would he?
He will be judged by an Islamic judge. And then
He will be judged by an Islamic judge under his caliphate. Listen there. He's avoiding the question, and now he goes on, and eventually you see the moderator, he goes and asks him again, and he says, well, he would be judged by an Islamic judge. What would an Islamic judge do? It would be execution. Wild. We know how Islam we have a vague idea of how Islam operates, but when we look at the previous head of Islam, or one of the heads of Islam that recently died in a plane crash, Ibrahim Raisi, he's gone and out of the picture, but he was known as the Butcher of Tehran. Crazy, because his whole spiel, his whole thing was, murdering people, murdering the Islamic, you would say, the Persian people. They no longer call themselves Persians. So crazy. But it's the U.S. that got this current regime in power. It was the U.S.'s doing.
£2 million with his and his organisation in order to fight against Islam or Muslims.
Look, he's asked you two questions. Firstly, under your caliphate, he would be executable, would he?
He will be judged by an Islamic judge, and then after that.
And his second question. His second question. Did you hear that?
Repeat this.
How many thousands of pounds are you receiving from the British government every year?
That's so wild. So, Paul, to your point, UK has been infiltrated by Islam. And this is over 15 years ago. No, I'm sorry. This is 2010. This is 2025, 15 years ago. This was reposted in August 2016 from BBC News. 15 years ago, this was starting to be implemented into the UK. And now we're seeing all that manifest. It's the same thing that happened with these leftists here in America, where they infiltrated by becoming the professors, by becoming the eventually training the kids to become the professors. And then we're seeing that this whole movement, Jordan Peterson and Charlie Kirk do this talk really, really well, where they talk about if these institutions can turn around. And I think I want to go there so that you can get an idea with his conversation with Charlie Kirk, Jordan Peterson, that is. And why it's absolutely wild, because that is extremely loud. Sorry. It's wild because they talk about these institutions. Let me get this set up. Let's see. I'm trying to find this. What do you guys think of everything that's happening here? Because this is, again, all unscripted, we're getting on a roll here, because here we go. I think this might be around it. This whole podcast is amazing. Go take a look, go listen to it. It's great.
On the edges on that I want to dive into, I was viewed as unseemly by the conservative establishment, because the conservative way of doing things, it's not to go set up a card table.
No, definitely not.
It was to speak properly.
Yeah.
And to go to Stanford and to get the highest possible education. And what I was unknowingly on the cutting edge of was something you mentioned earlier, is that conservatives have now become low trust of institutions.
You say, if they hate America, why are they here? Because they have the freedom to express their hate in their own country. This is to you, meme, right? Bugatti. they cannot do this type of speech. They cannot do these type of demonstrations in their own country, or else they would be executed. And so most of these young kids, their parents come over to America, and these kids grow up. They grow up to learn they learn from these teachers, essentially, who teach them to hate America. They teach them to hate America because America is, they took over the Native Americans here, raped and pillaged them, put them all into, put people into slavery here. And just America has this bad rep at the start, when really we know the two settlements that came here, Jamestown, Plymouth. I've talked about this before in previous live streams. Jamestown did not thrive, Plymouth did, but it was because of the biblical Christian values as what America was founded upon. Where America grew and the stem comes from is the settlement from Plymouth. Jamestown, on the other hand, died off because of the way that they were trying to bring a sort of communist Marxist way of doing, living and building a country. Who doesn't look at how Canada started? Yeah, so the college system is one problem. Yeah. If we look at, we can actually, and I'll let this play. I'm going to look for another awesome thing that you can find. This is on the United States archives, that you can find 40 communist goals to take over America. And it's literally exactly what happened in America.
And liberals have become high trust of institutions, whereas liberals are the ones that will defend the FDA, and they'll defend the CDC, and they'll defend Pfizer, and they'll defend the intelligence.
That's defending Pfizer. That's really.
But they will,
yeah,
because they're high trust of institutions.
Because there's no one more trustworthy from a leftist perspective than big pharma.
But they find themselves defending institutions.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, they were low trust of institutions. Don't send us to war. There is.
Yeah.
Whereas today, actually, and I was on the cutting edge of this, was in 2012, 2013, 14, conservatives were still on the high trust of institutions.
Okay, so let me rephrase that slightly.
Please,
because,
yeah.
Well, because
but you understand what I'm trying to communicate.
I do. Well, there's a real conundrum there, because a conservative with low trust in institutions is like an oxymoron, right? Well, but
we're trying to conserve something the institutions have destroyed.
Well, okay, that's the thing. So imagine that there's a hierarchy of institution. There's the fringe of the institution that's pretty exploratory. You can move into the center that's more conservative. Then you can move right to the bottom, which is, well, what? Well, I would say it's religious, fundamentally. Like, as you move towards the core,
that's right,
you move towards what's more religious.
You say here, Shep, curious, why do you think we shouldn't teach history? I think we should teach history, but we need to teach history not just in a one point of view, just to shape. Again, this was the infiltration of, and I actually have it pulled up here. This is the Communist Goals Congressional Record Appendix from January 10th, 1963. This is written, listed here in the Congressional Record. When we look at what teachers have been how they infiltrate into the colleges, into the high schools, even into the kindergarten range of classes, can start to introduce these things like transgenderism, gender studies. This was an infiltration that took years to change America and to bring it to where we are here. It's a long-term game that they played. And it doesn't work so well now, because we've seen how they are trying to have their star, like a Charlie Kirk, for podcasting, yet they're not able to hold their ground on long-form podcasting, because their sort of truths fall apart, because there's no foundation upon what they're saying. So I think history is amazing, great to teach, so that we don't repeat history. Not only that, so that we can learn where we got our values, our foundations from, our religious beliefs from. And yet America, through all of these things, we still have and give the freedom to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right? There's all these protections that you're given because the founders believed each individual has the freedom to do so because we have been given the free will by God. Socialism going to fix this country one day? I don't think so. You say, from any point of view, we enslaved countless human beings. Shouldn't that be taught or not? Right now, you're just babbling about unprovable conspiracies. These are not conspiracies. These are, in fact, documented accounts. Look into the Plymouth settlement that came here, and it was, I think, 2 years after the Jamestown settlement. And the way that Plymouth did these pilgrims, when they came over because they didn't want to follow the king's rules that he was starting to set up in Europe, basically wanting to be God. And these group of Christians said, no, we're not going to do that. So we're going to go and take a couple of us, go to America. They avoided a specific part of America. It was, I think it was Southern America, so that they can avoid being killed or taken back to Europe, because there was a settlement that went there even prior to them. This is all fascinating. You can even look up some of this information on Bill Federer's website, William Federer. We can even go through that also. Before we go on with Charlie Kirk, I think we need to go over this Marxist goals here, because so much we're going a million miles a minute right now. And my mind is everywhere, and I just want to bring this to you guys and bring it to your attention. So right now what you're seeing is the Communist Goals Appendix. Here, let me shrink this down. Congressional Record. So you guys can see the whole thing. We can just break it all down. There we go. Let's check it out. Okay. All right. Okay, yeah, that's good. All right, so it says, let's go over these goals. It says, number 1, U.S. acceptance of coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. And as I read through these, please just think about the things that the U.S. has done in the past, and really analyze it through the lens of where we are today and what is being taught. If you're in colleges, or if you're in school, just analyze these from that point of view. Develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. And these are ideas that have been tossed around in school and propagated by a bunch of teachers. Permit free trade between all nations, regardless of communist affiliation, and regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. Extension of long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. Provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. I mean, let's think of USAID. Oh boy. Grant recognition of Red China admission of Red China to the UN. And mind you, some of these things that are listed here have already come to pass. Is set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the German question by free elections under supervision of the UN. Prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the United States has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. Allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a new one world government We've heard that before, that word, that term, one world government. There's a clip of Biden talking about a liberal world order with its own independent armed forces. Some communist leaders believe that the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. Sometimes these are two centers compete. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other, as they are now doing in the Congo. Resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. Do away with all loyalty oaths. Continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. Capture one or both political parties in the United States. Yes, we've seen that. Wow. Use technical divisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. This is a big one. Get control of schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations, put the party line in textbooks. I mean, that is exactly what's happening in America. Let's go back to some questions, because I looks like I'm doing your best to avoid chat. Let me go back. Let me see what I'm missing here. I'm trying to catch up here. All right. Let's see. Are we people stalking other rape victims and bragging about it in various ways? Defund government agencies and give us back our money? Yeah, we need to shrink government big time. You can still do anything you want to hear in this country. Yeah, you can. Obviously, literally every civilization had slaves in some shape or form. What are you talking about? Yeah, he's right. There's a name that came up on the Charlie Kirk interview with our Jordan Peterson interview, talking about this guy who went, and he was actually from the UK, went on to do his best to eradicate slavery. And they used their whole GDP, or half of their GDP, in order to get rid of it. I guess nobody apparently knows his name. I never knew his name. Not taught in history. This guy sounds insane. I'm insane. 100% Delulu. Guessing you're referring to me, possibly. How dare the communists give us better schools, better transportation? Don't think so. I wonder if Jamestown failed not because of communism, but because of location, food shortage, lack of preparation, and conflicts with Native Americans. Yeah, no. They, at some point, just wanted the Native Americans to provide for them all of their food, all of their resources. The Native Americans said no, because this was happening during the winter. They actually said, no, we need to provide for our own. You guys can go and fend for yourselves. And what happened? They started to starve to death. And it didn't end so well for Jamestown. So no, it wasn't just because of location. No. It was because they wanted others to provide for them without, really anything in return. You say, so this is about communism or the existence of nuclear weapons as coercion. Well, this is about communism being infiltrating America with communism or ideas or such. I love guns and I am a communist. Well, you should love your Second Amendment right if you're here in America. I don't know if you're in America or not. Hey, Jason, you're here. Thanks, buddy. Glad you could make it. He will cite zero sources. I'm giving you a source right here. This is from the congressional record. I talked about the source here from what I'm talking about, the videos that I'm talking about, the videos I'm mentioning. I'm not just saying, oh, well, it's this, and that, and just, I'm not, what's that guy's name? Billy Carson? Communism brings bread lines. Okay, let's go back. All right. Here we go. Gain control of all student newspapers, use student riots to foment public protests under programs or organizations which are under communist attack, infiltrate the press, get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy-making positions. I mean, is that not what we're seeing? Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures? Yeah, that's happening. Mostly Hollywood, radio, woke radio. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate the good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. What happened during the George Floyd riots, like around that time, the defacing of all these historical figures, the removal, the taking off the heads. I mean, all this, I mean, come on, this is like in your face. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Come on, guys. Like this is infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need to intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Wow, that is discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. Guys, discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. I mean, this is absolutely wild. I mean, I can keep going down this list. I will pin it for you guys. You guys can take a look for yourselves if you want. But honestly, it's just wild. Yeah. Take a look at that. All right. Oh, that's the wrong pin. Sucker. Pin message. All right. There we go. Right pin. All right. Let's go back to Charlie Kirk here and let's see what they talk about with schools.
And so the conservative stance isn't anti-institution. It's a stance that notes that, I know what's happened. You know, in the story of Moses, when Moses goes off to get the commandments, so he's the pipeline to God, right? He leaves his brother in charge, Aaron.
They have a rave party.
That's exactly right. They make this golden calf, which is a materialistic object, and they dance naked in the streets and have an orgy. And that's what happens to the political when it's detached from the sacred, when it loses
that's exactly
that.
Right.
Okay, so it isn't that the conservatives have become skeptical of institutions. It's that the conservatives have noted that the institutions no longer serve the purpose for which they were established.
Chartered.
Right? Chartered, exactly. And they're objecting, and that's happening everywhere. And that's part of this radical secularization.
Yes.
It's not just secularization, because there should be a separation between church and state, let's say. It's not that the institutions have become secular. It's that they've turned 180 degrees from their original orientation and are now rampaging as madly as possible in the other direction. So the universities are no longer the fortress walls against the barbarians. They're actually the voice of the barbarians, right? Hence the pro-Hamas demonstrations on campus.
Or the Black Lives Matter stuff, or the transgender stuff.
Yeah,
That's
right.
very well said.
Exactly. Okay, so but we got to get that terminology exactly right, because it's very dangerous for conservatives to conceptualize themselves as anti-institutional, because then they become indistinguishable from the radicals.
Sure.
So it isn't that. It's a return to the sorts of things we talked about at the beginning, like Wilberforce.
That's right.
Those foundational principles.
Yes.
And you're going to campuses saying, you people have lost the plot.
Exactly.
Right, which they definitely have. Like there's the universities, I cannot see, I've been working in various ways to figure out how to revitalize the universities, and the bricks and mortar universities Like, how do you revitalize an institution that's dominated by people who are aiming in the wrong direction?
Guys, I wanted to bring out to you a quote here from John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie. If you guys don't know these guys' names, Rockefeller's General Education Board, founded in 1902, they aimed to standardize schooling. And this is to essentially train these kids to become factory workers right out from the gate. Here's a quote here. It says, a 1913 report from the board stated, "We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or of science. The task is simple. We will organize children and teach them to do in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way. This suggests a focus on efficiency and labor readiness, though it doesn't explicitly mention machines." Here we go. It says, "The structure of schooling with fixed hours, typically 8 to 3 p.m., has been linked to preparing students for factory or office work." Now, let's see here. "The common school is the institution which can best prepare the young for the duties of life, including submission to lawful authority." This is from Horace Mann, an education reformer, noted in 1844. Now, when we do a deeper dive on John D. Rockefeller, gosh, this is so, if you guys don't, let's see. Let me go back to your comments really quick. Carnegie used slave labor to build his railroads. Carnegie was I believe, a mentor of John D. Rockefeller, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see if I can find these. This is on X. Yeah, this is going to be a nation of workers. Here we go. I think this is what it is. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. Although Rockefeller's board closed in 1964, the same unsettling sentiment is shared by the education system today. The traditional lecture and tests format is prevalent in many science, math, and social study classrooms. This method has little to no practical use in the world and fails to engage students and helping them develop critical thinking. Yeah, I need to find out that quote. It says schools like the government. Let's see if this is. Oh no, that's not from John D. Rockefeller. There is a article that would be able to literally tell us all that what I'm talking about. It's what's mentioned here from that quote I read you earlier. Yeah, we'd have to go back and look for that. But otherwise, let's continue.
Irredeemable.
So what does that mean? Okay, so let's continue practically here. So tell me what happens the first time at Wisconsin.
Conversation every 15 minutes. A couple kids were interested, found a chapter leader.
You found a chapter.
Yeah,
okay, so that was success.
So it was a success. We found a couple groups of people and we started the group. And then I did it at Marquette University because I had a friend that went there.
And so you walked away from that. How did you feel when you
Exhilarated.
You did.
Because then I was able to go back to 2 or 3 people giving us money.
And say.
And they gave us $500. I said, now we have a chapter. We can, and they said, okay, well, let us know how it goes. Proof of concept.
Right.
And so then we did it at Marquette, and we did it at University of Illinois, and we did it at Indiana.
So you went from 0 to 1,
and
which is a huge leap.
It was a huge lift.
It's a huge leap.
Because getting that second chapter was so much easier than
of course
ex nihilo.
Of course. 0 to 1 is the first customer is impossible.
And then
the second one's hard.
It was one of the most fulfilling days in Turning Point USA history.
Right. Okay.
was
Okay.
being able to get a singular chapter.
Right. Of course. Because that's the one that's most unlikely.
Exactly.
Your first sale is by far the most unlikely.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So then you went to Marquette.
Then Marquette.
Okay. And what happened
Very
there?
similar situation, but it was also a friend of somebody in high school, and they were a private school, so it was a little harder to do the typical outreach, but they applied for a permit in like the student center, and same sort of thing.
So you were permitted from the beginning as well.
Well, in UW-Madison, they don't care as much because it was a public school, so they just, you can kind of, any individual can walk on campus and kind of.
Right. Okay.
But Marquette, I had a friend that I went to high school with. They said, yeah, I'll apply for something for you.
Okay.
And similar sort of thing. And they said, I sat there for 5 hours, Jordan. I would sit there for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
Because that was time well spent. Because for me, I was trying to build the semblance of something, a real infrastructure, a real organization. And boy, was it difficult.
Yeah.
But it was never disheartening, though, because I had nothing to lose. You have to understand, I'm an 18, 19-year-old kid.
Right.
It's not like I'm mortgaging the house. It's not like I have two kids.
Yeah.
So there's such low downside and unlimited
Right.
upside.
Sure. Well, that's the entrepreneurial niche.
And
right?
it was such an adventure because it's a campus I've never been to, talking to a bunch of kids. It's, you're almost having verbal combat, which is very entertaining.
Well, and I imagine too that it must have been heartening to you as well to see that you could hold your own.
Exactly. And so that's a really important point. Here I am as a kid that didn't go to college thinking, do I really have the intellectual capacity to joust with kids that are learning all day long?
Yeah,
I
right.
realized they're not learning all day long.
Yeah.
You see, I was reading von Mises and Rothbard before I came across you.
Yeah.
Hayek, Milton Friedman. Very libertarian economics was my baseline foundational philosophy. A lot of reasons for that. Very, very interesting. Tons of profound insights, some of which don't, I think, actually play out very well in the material world. But so I would encounter kids on campuses who professed to be studying economics, for example, and they didn't know very much.
Right.
And I realized, I said, well, there's a disconnect. They're borrowing money to go learn about things that I actually have a greater mastery of because I was.
Well, you can learn a lot if you read the right books.
Oh, and in my idle time, I became obsessed with being proficient and understanding economics. That was kind of my entry.
Oh, yeah, I see.
And so you have to remember 2013.
You know that burning bush story?
Oh, yeah.
That's Moses' entry point, by the way. So the burning bush
Exodus
moment,
3, I think,
the burning bush moment happens when Moses goes off the beaten path. He's a shepherd, right? So a good man, keeps the wolves and lions at bay, serves the vulnerable. He's got that mastered. And then something attracts his attention, and he takes it seriously. And that's what transforms him.
So I wanted to go back to this Plymouth settlement because we were talking about it earlier. I just remembered about that. So let's go back. Let's talk about Plymouth for a second. This is from American Minute. You can find this, AmericanMinute.com. You can find this document here. And this is Bill Federer's amazing historian documentation that he has here. So it says a unique American experience is being celebrated at the spot where the Pilgrims landed in 1620. This is actually an article here, but when we talk about, it says, Federer pointed out that the first attempt to an alternative form of government happened when Israel entered the Promised Land after 40 years in the wilderness and 400 years of slavery in Egypt. There was no king for the first 400 years in the Promised Land, and everyone was equal under the law of God. The law specifically said there is no favoritism in judgment. It lasted as long as the priests taught the law. He said when the priest stopped teaching the law, every man did what was right in their own eyes. They turned back the clock. They got a king, Saul, who a shorter time later killed all the priests. He had written laws and they were harsh. The death penalty for every other thing there is, where we get the phrase draconian law. They got rid of Draco, and then they got Solon, who invented democracy and then left town, Federer said. It said, in democracy, everyone every day had to go to the market and talk politics. If you didn't keep up with it every day, you were called an idiotus, which is where we get the word idiot. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato warned democracy could last only as long as the people have virtue. When they give up their virtue and give into unnecessary pleasures and engage in immoral conduct, they raid the treasury and they wonder where to get more money. They vote to take the money from the rich people. The resulting shortage turns into a tug of war, and people call for someone to come fix the mess. Someone comes along and promises to fix it, and they yield to him their privileges. Sooner or later, this person consolidates power, targets his political opponents, and he stands in the chariot of state and is revealed as the tyrant. America's founders drew lessons from these historical experiences from Israel. They adopted the principle of equality and rights that they are given by a creator. He says, you don't get any of that from Athens. A majority could vote to kill a minority, Federer said. We get the idea of elections from Athens. Demos means people. This is cracy. Democracy, right? Democracy means rule. We get the idea of republic from Rome, where they had people to represent them as the assembly of government. He explained that the word republic comes from the word rep, a short form of res or publica, or in the place of. So a republic is a representative form of government. However, in America, we took from Athens the idea of electing our representatives. They can't do whatever they want because they restrained by something called a constitution, he said. The idea of limiting the power of a king or governed by a constitution is traced back to the Magna Carta. 5 stages he talks about here. And Plato, in about 380 BC in Athens, wrote in his work Republic that the government of Athens would go through 5 stages. The first is called rule of capable, people who are responsible to know how to run farms and businesses. They're followed by timocracy, a form of government which rulers are motivated by love of fame. These are the people who have no experience running anything. They just got famous. These are actors or athletes, and they hate to be dishonored so they can be manipulated. So this is so interesting because we're talking about a lot of the conversations here, talking about America's founding and so on and so forth. There's so much history that is involved in all of this that we can't just take one part of the story and say, oh, well, this is America's truth. This is America's founding. This is exactly how America started. And America is started by a bunch of racists and slave owners and all that stuff. Now, we don't go into detail in this article here, but he's talking about this is a faith of a nation's forefathers celebrated at Plymouth. So in the same area where the Plymouth settlement came, and this is, again, a separate settlement from Jamestown, which Plymouth came in 1620. I think Jamestown came in 1619, so it might have been a year before. As I mentioned, it was a year prior, or 2 years after. I think that was obviously incorrect, but seems like it was a year after they came. Shalom from Israel. Shalom. Glad you can be here. 2025 is wild. Yeah. Sam Setter versus Andrew Wilson. Capitalism is an economic structure. Socialism is political structure. I think you mean capitalist or communist. Yeah, it's late here. I'm getting my words mixed up. If God was evil, would you know it? You can't have capitalism while simultaneously having socialism. You can be a social capitalist. Most Scandinavian countries are. So we talk about, oh gosh, I really gotta go on to some of this stuff here because this is Here we go. I just lost it. Where was it? Constitution versus Islam. This is going to be quite on the subject. The Quran versus Constitution, why they're incompatible. Boy, all this stuff we can just even go through. And anyway, I want to get back to Charlie Kirk here and see what he's talking about with the, trying to get to that point where we're talking about schools, the infiltration of schools, or these teachers that infiltrated the schools, or basically he talks about that there's this big pile of money, and it's basically, you know what? I can actually search a transcript. How about that? Because that's exactly what I'm looking for here. Pile of money. See if money. Let's see if their money. Let's see. Yeah. Here it is. About an hour mark. Let's see if we can
At least.
Yeah. Well, leave large piles of money laying around unguarded and see who comes in first to take it. Right. That's that parasitical type.
That's right.
They'll swarm in there like mad. That's happened in
And
all
they
the
gravitate to
foundations.
the universities.
Yeah, well, it's the same phenomena that we talked about earlier, that cluster B, narcissistic,
Yes.
dark tetrad, 4% of the population. They're looking around to see where, what would you say, inhabitable carcasses are lying around unintended.
And they're disproportionately represented at the.
Yeah, not a genocide. I agree with you. This is not a genocide. Come on. I mean, the whole thing that happened here, the things that's happening in Israel right now with, I mean, think about it. We've got Hamas. Hamas came in and just completely killed, murdered, kidnapped, raped innocent people on October the 7th. And people call that, and then Israel goes in and defends its own people, and they start calling it genocide. Because they had to go, and remember, Hamas likes to put their outposts, their weapons, their headquarters in civilian populated areas, schools, hospitals. I mean, gosh, the whole hospital there in Gaza that we saw, that they had their whole headquarter compound underground. I forget the name of the hospital, but come on. Human Rights Watch. You're quoting the Human Rights Watch, really? Crime of extermination, acts of genocide in Gaza, sure. He thinks history started October 7, 2023. I don't know what you mean by that. History started. So it's okay to flatten apartments, schools, universities, and hospitals. Look, Israel dropped leaflets and did every possible measure to be able to save some of these people from dying. Yet a lot of these people could not leave because what? Hamas was barricading them, blocking them from leaving and moving where Israel was telling them to go. And so basically using Palestinians as body shields. Even Sinwar tried peacefully marching to the fence. Israel shot at peaceful women and children. Sinwar was actually saved by Israel, removed a tumor from his head, and what did he go and do back at Israel? Yeah. He died terribly, a miserable death, and he deserved it. Hey, bro, gonna level your home. Here's a leaflet. Yeah. Just discounting every other thing. discounting every other thing that is actually there, the truth. Israel's not letting food in and sniping aid workers. Yeah, this is crazy. This is complete propaganda, absolute garbage. You're not informed to talk about something like this. Why am I not informed? Just look at everything that's happening. You want to pick a side, you're going to pick a side. Wild. I don't need credentials to talk about anything. You just learn this stuff literally. You can learn from either the woke media or you can learn from the truth. We know. I know what the truth is. Do you? Wild.
Academy.
Yep.
That 4%
Yes.
might be 40% of the administrators or the professor types. Because think about
well,
it.
increasingly that became the case.
Because they might be saying something to that target audience, the student, but they actually want to see that student become a leftist. There's a lot of Machiavellian influences in how these professors present their ideas.
Yeah, well, it's also the case that it was the Machiavellian So what happened at the university, I watched this, is that
you lived it.
By the way, this is so funny because this is what happens when I have, like, literally, I don't have any moderators. I'm not some big YouTube company. I have, this is all ran by me. And it's just so much going down in the comments. I love it. We're here to disagree. We're here to agree on things. Have your disagreements here. That's fine. I don't mind. We talk about this all day long. 12:30 a.m. here in America. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about everything. Yeah, but you started with Hamas killing innocent people on October the 7th. Innocent people did die, which was wrong. But right or wrong, what was Hamas's reason for doing what they did? You tell me what was their reason. Some people say that it was there's a video, actually, if I can pull it up. One sec. See if we can pull this up, because there's a video. I don't even know if I'm going to find it. Let's see here. Yeah, this is going to be like... All right, well, I'll do some researching on that. But Hamas has in their charter, if you guys don't know, their charter is, because they follow Islamic fundamentalism. Do you understand that in their charter, they talk about the elimination of the Jewish state, the Jewish nation, and Americans? They talk about murdering them, killing them, because they believe that they own this land. You see, Gazans literally living under occupation in a concentration camp, bro. Before October 7th, Israel was killing hundreds of people in the West Bank. Was it also in self-defense? Yeah, when we talk about the hundreds of bombings that were happening, the terrorist attacks that were happening from Palestinians, from Hamas agents, operatives, the Palestinian Authority that is in the West Bank. Israel is literally trying to protect their people, literally trying to go in and eliminate the virus. They're the only ones that let in the Palestinians. They're the only ones that let in these people. Look, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying that the Palestinian people need to die. That's not what I'm saying here. All life is precious. But the fact that we're arguing that Hamas, what they did was right, and according to your words, you say Gazans living under occupation in a concentration camp. Israel evacuated all of Gaza. They evacuated all of their Israeli citizens out of Gaza. This is in 2005. in order to place these Palestinians in Gaza. And no one would take them in. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Sudan. Jordan is, no. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Libya, or oh gosh. Is it Libya? Is that right above Israel? I'm drawing a blank here. My gosh. It's not Libya. It's Libya's to the left of Israel. What? I gotta look at a map. Lebanon. The whole war in Lebanon that happened there as well, where they infiltrated the governments to, and it really just became the Islamic Brotherhood spawning from Egypt is wild. Lebanon, thank you. Yeah. Palestinians never officially claimed it. You should read book. Lebanon, thank you, guys. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Lebanon, yes. The Palestinians that were in Lebanon, and they actually, there's this, gosh, there's so much content to just even go over. I think her name is Brigitte Gabrielle, PBD. She talks about this in great detail. I mean, gosh. Here we go. We'll just look at this short because the conversation is absolutely it's wild. Here we go. Let's go back here. Yeah, you guys can see that.
This hatred to Christians and Christianity just come out of nowhere. From what did we do so wrong to make like that Muslim community just hate and want to kill us right off the rip?
Look, there are 2,000 years of war history in the Middle East. This did not start yesterday.
Yeah.
But it ramped up after the creation of the religion of Islam. Now, not all Muslims are radical. You and I, we lived in the Middle East, Patrick. They are the most wonderful people, hospitable, kind, open-hearted. Not all of them want to kill you. However, there is such a radical element to the religion. If you are a Christian or a Jew or Armenian raised in the Middle East, you understand there's a saying, أولاً يأتي السبت وبعده الأحد. First comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. First we kill the Jews, then we come for the Christians. So if you're a child raised in the Middle East, you're raised hearing this sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys gotta watch that full podcast, regardless of your beliefs here, PBD, about Pat Bet-David. She's phenomenal in what she talks about with this sort of history and her upbringing and everything that she went through in Lebanon, being under this war that happened, that she finds herself in between, because Lebanon was majority Christian country. And what they wanted to do, what they decided to do, was they decided to let other religions come in to help rule this government. They allowed Islam, they allowed these Muslims to come into the government to take over these powers. And when we look at the Crusades, when we go back to the Crusades, they were highly successful in capturing certain areas of power in order to kill and destroy with their Islamic fundamentalism, because they truly believed in Islamic fundamentalism. Right, at the core of it is demonic. At the core of it is really murderous. It's insane. It's radical. Just look at the Hamas charter. Just look at it. How about Ukraine? Yeah, Ukraine, the mineral deals that have spun up as of recent Let's see if we can get some stories on that. I actually think I saved something here with regards to the mineral deals that they reached. And oh, this is wild, California. Gosh, California. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to go onto Breitbart and see exactly what that post was about. I guess I didn't save it. Because they've been meeting, they've been in ongoing talks, and maybe it was something else. Citizens Free Press. Here we go. All right. U.S. and Ukraine signed long-awaited natural resources deal. This is significant because the Ukraine has, and the U.S. is full of these natural resources, full of it. Yet these environmentalists block the U.S. from being able to do anything with regards to digging and unearthing these minerals that we need in order to sustain ourselves as an economy. This is why we heavily relied upon China to supply their natural resources. And he's going to pivot to Ukraine probably for the best because he doesn't know anything about Lebanon. Look, we can talk about these things all day long. What do you want? What do you want to know about Lebanon? Muslims for Trump. Neither side has a moral high ground. Guess what happens in a war? Nutcracker moral equivalence won't get you anywhere. I'm sorry, but there can be a right and a wrong side. Do you get paid to do this? I don't get paid at all. Due to all war creates debt. We are 36 trillion in debt because of war. Yeah, war. Yeah, there's a lot of money that happens in war. A lot of money that goes around. So we've been in war with the Middle East for oil and other stuff. It's their land. It's Israel's land. They were given this land by God. This is the whole promise that God gave to Abraham. This is the whole laying out of the lands in Joshua. You read Joshua, read all the chapters. It gets a little informational heavy during the last part of Joshua because we're talking about the splitting of the areas and the lands that were promised to the children of Israel, where Moses had given and told certain specific people, hey, you can have this land. You can have that land. God, LMAO, what about God? You don't believe in God? I was about to ask materials. Have you read? You just mentioned Breitbart and PBD. I was about to ask what materials you have read. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, materials here. Let's talk about materials. We're jumping all over the place. This is crazy. This is wild. U.S. has signed a deal with Kyiv to share profits from future sale of Ukraine's mineral and energy reserves. After months of tense negotiations, the deal aims to provide an economic incentive for the U.S. to continue to invest in Ukraine's defense and reconstruction, as well as to address Washington's concern over the amount of aid it has already contributed. Ukraine is believed to have vast reserves of critical minerals like graphite, titanium, and lithium. They are highly sought after because of their renewable energy, military technology, and infrastructure. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it showed both sides were committed to lasting peace and prosperity in Ukraine. Now, if you guys don't know this, I didn't know much of this. I mean, of course, it's kind of, I wouldn't say common sense, but a lot of these minerals that we see on the what do we call here? Periodic table of elements. Let's see. Things like hydrogen, beryl, let's see, titanium, of course. Titanium, we use titanium in phones. copper, silicone, aluminum. There's a lot of these elements here and minerals that we utilize for technologies such as chips, for our computers, for our phones, the materials. A lot of stuff that we utilize and that we need, and this is why the China was so was at the top of the game to provide all of these minerals, because they are the ones pulling this stuff out of their their land. They're the only ones that are excavating these minerals. If he reads chat, he can't defend his donors. None of those are rare earth elements. We are already exempted phones and computers from China. Yeah, we did. But I'm talking about these types of minerals are the minerals that are utilized for specific technologies, chips, and all these other things. There's a great breakdown that Charlie Kirk actually goes through all of this stuff. We can talk about it. We don't need to. Really, doesn't matter. Says the U.S. Treasury Secretary said in a video statement that the deal would help unlock Ukraine's growth assets. The language of the announcement shows much more solidarity with Ukraine than is usual for the Trump administration. It refers to Russia's full-scale invasion and adds that no state or person who financed or supplied the Russian war machine will be allowed to benefit from the reconstruction of Ukraine. The Kremlin has not yet responded to the agreement. For Kyiv, it is seen as essential to accessing U.S. military aid, because Ukraine still wants to continue to receive aid, just as they did during the Biden administration. So the critical mineral deposits across Ukraine, we have here graphite, titanium, zirconium, rare earths, lithium. Those are the minerals that we are seeing here. This is a map. Let me see if I can pull it up for you so you can see exactly what I'm looking at. Here we go. There we go. This is what we're looking at. This is what the U.S. wants. These are some of the, we see Russia-controlled area includes large mineral deposits. These are the things that we need to sustain our, well, I guess sustain our economy, but Charlie Kirk is a good reference, man. He really is. And polls show that the vast majority of Gazans and Palestinians in the West Bank still support Hamas. Yeah. Yeah, they do, unfortunately. Hamas hasn't allowed an election since. Yeah, that is true. That is absolutely true. Okay, so here it says President Donald Trump has reportedly pushed for the agreement as prerequisite to offering any future security guarantees to Kyiv. Crucially, the draft of the deal indicates Ukraine will be giving Washington access to some of its natural resources in return for future U.S. security assistance. But that is significantly less than what Trump had wanted, which was to get paid back for all U.S. military aid given since the start of the war. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy has managed to eke out some concessions from Washington. The deal was delayed after U.S. authorities said Kyiv was trying to make last-minute changes. Of course, on Wednesday afternoon, a U.S. source familiar with the talks criticized Ukraine for seeking to reopen some terms they had apparently been finalized over the weekend. The source said sticking points had included governance of the fund, issues with transparency, and steps to ensure that all funds will be fully traceable. Technical documents were signed last week by representatives of both countries. Here's that image here. The initial agreement was due to be signed February, but fell apart following a heated exchange at the White House when Trump accused Zelenskyy of gambling with World War III. If you hadn't seen that clip, that is absolutely wild. We should just go over that. That's Zelenskyy Trump meeting. Let's see if we can even just pull up that moment. Here we go.
United States of America, and for the good of the world. I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred, and I understand that, but I can tell you the other side isn't exactly in love with, him either. So it's not a question of alignment. I'm aligned with the world. I want to get the thing set. I'm aligned with Europe. I want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to be tough? I could be tougher than any human being you've ever seen. I'd be so tough. But you're never going to get a deal that way. So that's the way it goes. All right, one more question.
I will respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact
2015.
2014.
2014 and 2015.
2014.
Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but
That's exactly right.
Yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversation, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him, me, like a new president. In 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. Ceasefire. All of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken the ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
This gets wild.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now,
How are we not embarrassed by how Trump advanced acted here? I mean, come on. We got Zelenskyy absolutely trying to stomp around like he's got the power here in the Oval Office, and like he's going to call the shots here, and he's being very, his pride here, his big head is getting in the way of even negotiating any sort of peace, because we know Zelenskyy is a warmonger. What am I talking about? I'm talking about your question here. Why should we be? These Pew polls are out here. Anyway.
you guys are going around and forcing
this is what you're so used to Biden and the way he was leading this country that this is not normal for you. Of course, this is something that we haven't seen in, I mean, how long?
To the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful?
We should. No, I wouldn't even. I'd probably get banned from YouTube from showing any sort of clips or footage of Zelenskyy and his days being a stripper, talk show, an actor. I mean, this guy's a fraud.
To come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country.
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future.
This is wild.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't.
I'm not playing cards.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said...
How is he not a warmonger? And how is that Russian propaganda? That doesn't make any sense. This guy wants the war to continue. He wants no peace settlements. He doesn't want any of that. He wants the money. He wants the money from the U.S. And he is trying to, here we see that he's trying to do what he did with Biden. And this is how we continue to supply them with munitions, with military aid, all this stuff. And for what? To see 5,000 Russians and Ukrainians die each and every day. Is life not precious here? Are we just going to say, well, screw the lives of these people? Come on. Come on.
Thanks.
You haven't been
in this
allowed.
cabinet.
You haven't been allowed.
This cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again,
I tell you.
just say thank you.
I said a lot of times
to
American people.
Except that there are disagreements.
This is wild.
And let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me.
For you
that wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry.
It's going to be a tough deal to make because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia. The 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to.
Check this out. This is from the UN Watch. This is this guy, Halal Nuar, speaks out. This is from quite a while ago, but this video is quite insane. And let's just see what it says here.
Appointed by the decision of certain member state to cease participation.
Shifted participation. Item on the agenda of the Human Rights Council, and we see, unfortunately, an increasing number of states.
Here we go.
Day for justice.
Israeli occupation is terminated.
You know what? Actually, I think I need to go back because this is very important concerning Israel and concerning everything that I know we just switched from Zelenskyy over to Israel, but there's so much that we just can cover here because it's all important. It's all going to the big picture of it all. When we look at the Bible, when we look at prophecy, when we look at everything, everybody is going to be pointing fingers at Israel that they are the enemy. And this is crazy. But this is 2014 September, as it shows in the video here. So human rights, this is the agenda item, a human rights situation in Palestine and other occupied Arab territories. It says many democracies are now boycotting agenda item 7 as it singles out Israel. Why do you never read chat messages that disagree with you? I mean, I see so much coming in here and I appreciate that, but it says, look at, okay, where are we at here? What is it that you want me to answer or read exactly? What's the disagreement here? Bro's rage baiting for 200 views. He won't answer. This guy is a fool. Let's see. What am I missing here? Would Trump be a warmonger if Canada invaded Montana? Okay, why is there a need to invade Canada? We're talking about a hypothetical here. Why is there a need for Trump to invade Canada? Would he be a warmonger? If he wanted to continue the war, if he wanted to have people fund the war just so they can continue to have endless wars, just like the previous presidents wanted to just continue to be involved in Middle Eastern affairs when we don't need to be involved in Middle Eastern affairs? Do you think students should be targeted for their free speech? No. Students in colleges, even in high schools, should have an open dialogue on free speech. Or show open dialogue on free. They should be able to have open dialogue. This is healthy for society to thrive and to disagree upon things. This is, you can, just as a reminder, you can't debate a MAGA. You can only educate them. A debate requires at least similar level of education and or information. You can debate a Republican, just not a MAGA. What do you mean by a MAGA? Like somebody who just sides only with MAGA? I mean, where's the separation here? Is there's MAGA and Republican different in your understanding here, in your definitions here? It says what would you say the same for Trump if, okay, I already read that. So dude, fix your black screen. Yeah, I know. Keeps flickering. I don't know what else to do with a flicker. I'm just connected wirelessly on my camera here. It says, why do I not have a right to return as a Palestinian to Palestine while any Jew can make? What do you mean you don't have the right to return to return as a Palestinian to Palestine? How can you not? I mean, would you want to go if you're not there right now? I mean, would you want to be in that situation? I mean, I wouldn't. I would want to stay put where I am if it's not involved anywhere in that war, because that war can be deadly for anybody in that region. It's a hotbed. Imagine, oh gosh, where did I go? I lost it. See, imagine defending your home and being called a warmonger. So Ukraine, they're most certainly defending. He's trying to defend the country that he is operating, for sure. But constantly wanting America to send Ukraine billions and billions of dollars for what? To fund an endless war that is not going anywhere. There's no talks, nothing for anything, no agreements for a ceasefire, or rather even agreements to have a ceasefire, and for Russia not to break that, for Ukraine to not want more and just be hungry for the military might of America, wanting to join NATO so that he can invoke Article 5 in order to destroy Russia and then take over Russia. Remember, Russia during Gorbachev's time, around the Berlin Wall, Zelenskyy needs to go, yeah, I agree. Do you have any opinions of your own? All your opinions are Trump talking points. No, they're not, man. During Gorbachev's days, there was the agreement that Ukraine, there was always a talk about Ukraine not being a part of NATO. Russia has asked to join NATO. They have denied them. America has denied Russia from joining NATO. don't even know what I'm talking about. Hey, have a good night, Jeremy. Thanks for joining the podcast stream. Trying to read your comments and commentate at the same time. Not very good at it, apparently. I'm not saying they don't have reasons for war, both sides. I'm saying, do they have better reasons to stop it, like living soldiers? Yeah, they need to preserve lives here. We're supposed to defend our allies and support our treaties, which is why we need to support Ukraine. They'll definitely invade Europe if Ukraine falls. How do you know that for certain? Do you have insight into Putin's mind, what he wants to do? Because the sentiment is very different. The Ukrainian sentiment is very different from what you might even think. Stop the war, prepare for the real war. The spiritual war is the real war we're talking about here. Yeah, wild.
NAM is deeply disappointed by the decision of certain member states to cease participation in Agenda Item 7.
We are deeply disappointed that certain members from the VOG have shifted participation to a few words under Item 4 while neglecting and undermining the Agenda Item 7.
That the Arab group would like to express its extreme discontent as to the decision by the European Union to boycott Item 7, which is a fundamental item on the agenda of the Human Rights Council. And we see, unfortunately...
How does the spiritual war mean nothing? The spiritual war is the physical war is a manifestation of the physical. That way, I think I got that backwards. The physical war is a manifestation of what happens in the spiritual. That's what I'm trying to say. The physical war is all a manifestation of what's happening in the physical, in the spiritual. When we see these pictures of what's happening, what happens in Daniel, what happens in that chapters 9, there's a manifestation of what happens there with the Prince of Persia, where he was trying to, is that even right? Prince of Persia? Where he's trying to, Gabriel is trying to get the message to Daniel. Daniel's fasting during this time. We learned that it's 21 days that he's fasting, and he's trying to get a message to Daniel, yet he has to go and fight this prince, powerful prince, and he has to call upon Michael to help him out. But yet as Daniel is fasting and praying and going through all these things that are happening while he's in captivity, eventually he gets to him and says, look, God had sent me immediately as you started praying. And as you started praying, there's all this stuff I had to go through just to get you the answer. There's so much that happens in the spiritual that we don't see, yet we see all the manifestations happening here in the physical, and that is the demonic manifestations of so much.
An increasing number of
Spiritual war is like playing swords with your imaginary friends. Well, sure. If that's what you want to say, by all means. I mean, you don't have no belief in the Bible. You think that the spiritual war is just imaginary, or spiritual, anything spiritual is just imaginary, or because of hallucinations or drugs. I don't know. Not sure your standpoint on that, but I wholeheartedly believe in what the Bible says when it talks about that it's not flesh and blood, right? It's not the flesh and blood that we are against here. It's the principalities and the powers of the air that we war against, is what Paul talks about.
States insisting on boycotting Item 7 in an obvious attempt to cover up the truth about the Israeli occupation and its violations of...
Polly, then why am I ready to die if spiritual is imaginary? Let's do the Crusades again. No, we don't want to do that again. I live this. What are you on? I've been praying for Crusades. Why? Why have you been praying for Crusades? The Bible is a book of myth and fairy tales. Time to grow up. Man, that is such a terrible argument. Where's your argument? Where's your basis for that? That argument that you're pulling up here, that the Bible's a myth of fairy tale. How is it a myth? Book of myth and fairy tales when this is all documented history? Is the American documents that we have based on George Washington myth and fairy tales? Is it just a book that somebody wrote? No, we actually live in America. So Israel because of the fact that we have the Bible that talks about Israel and the start of Israel, and they're here today is actually an incredible miracle if you think about it. Talking snakes, talking donkeys, fairy tales. So that's the greatest miracle is the beginning of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that is true, then talking snakes, talking donkeys aren't a impossibility. Israel started in 1948. Israel did not start in 1948. Israel became a nation again in 1948. The Jews were displaced into many different countries. Come on, Christianity needs to take a break from all the murder talk. The Bible is a book. The Bible is a book. The Bible is history written by man. Yes, scribed by men, inspired by God. Through these men, it was the physical possession of God's Holy Spirit upon these men that gave them the ability to write these profound things. These aren't just words written on a paper that mean absolutely nothing, like proverbs of just like sayings that we have, right? Sayings that we have generally that speaking, I mean, you can probably name a whole bunch. It says, why would God create only two people? God created two people so they can then procreate. As he says in the beginning, he says, be fruitful and multiply. Israel was never a nation, as you say, bro. Why is it not? We have all of the historical documentation as we have in our modern day Bible. Our modern day Bible wasn't just created in, I don't know, the last 20, 50 years, 100 years. Wild. What world are you guys living in right now? My issue with the book is that it's not the original text. It's been edited, rewritten multiple times over the course of a millennia. It's difficult for me to get past that. So during the early documents that we have come across, we see these, you say rewritten or edited. Okay, this is Christians getting the word out. I'm not saying they're trying to rewrite or edit these things, but throughout the course of history, Christians wanted to spread this information. And so what they're doing is they're writing the documents that are given to us by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are Luke is a historian. He's also a what would you call him? He's a physician, and he goes and he talks about he's documenting these things in an orderly account, and he's writing this information to somebody called Theophilus. And Theophilus just means believer of, what is it? Believer of God. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank right now, but he's writing this orderly account in order to show this man, Theophilus, the things that he heard and the things that have been seen. And so I think a good starting point for that, let's look up something here, because what's his name? Here we go. This is going to be absolutely informational for you who can't get over the copies of copies, because I think we're going to here we go.
The only thing more popular than me.
Come on, get past this thing. Here we go.
Putting these pieces of Christian. I call it broken telephone. It's messed up. I whisper that into the person. It's not only that.
Here we go. Let's just take a look at this for a second.
But they're not translating from those previous languages. They're translating from the original languages and seeing how throughout history different individuals and groups have rendered those words in previous or different languages. This is a confusion of translation versus transmission. Translation is going through one language into another. Transmission is the long history of how we go from texts written in ancient languages 2,000 years ago to today. They're confusing that. They're confusing categories. Not only that, but what David Cross and others communicate with the telephone game is a single line of transmission. If you've never played the telephone game, it starts with me having a particular message. I whisper that into the person over there's ear, and they whisper into the next person's ear. And this goes down the line through all the pews until we get to the very back, and then we get that person at the very back to relay the message that they were whispered to. And of course, it's broken. I mean, this is why it's called broken telephone. It's messed up because of the rules of the game. It's a single person whispering into a single person's ear. You have to whisper. You can't say it twice. There are rules like this. But is that really what we have with the Bible? David Cross and Joe Rogan would say so. But if you look at the history of the Bible, what you find is that there were multiple authors writing at multiple times in multiple locations to multiple audiences who themselves were in multiple different locations. So it's not a single line of transmission. It's multiple lines of transmission injected with steroids. Why? Because not only do you have the original authors writing at different times to different places, to different people in different locations, but then you have scribes who are likewise copying in different locations, writing to different audiences at different times who are themselves in different locations. And if we look at the history of this, between the 1st century when the New Testament was written and the 4th century, you have copies of both the Old and the New Testaments being copied and spread around all over the ancient world, so that by the time you get to the 4th century, you have hundreds, if not a few thousand, copies of what we would call the books of the Bible.
By the way, to clarity, you say, how do you know it's inspired by God? It's not a collection of impressive information that men couldn't have come up with themselves. It's written exactly like someone from that time and knowledge. But this information is transcendent, meaning that it applies not only to the culture at the time, but to us today. We see here in 2 Timothy 3:16, it says, actually 4:1, it says, I charge you in the presence of God and of Jesus Christ, Christ Jesus, who is to judge the living and the dead, and by his appearing and his kingdom, preach the word, be ready in season and out of season, reprove, rebuke, and exhort with complete patience and teaching. Oh, you know what? That's not scripture. Let's see here. It is, right here. Sorry. Yeah. 3:16. It says, 2 Timothy 3:16, all scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. This is where we get that phrase or that understanding of how do we know it's inspired by God. 2 Timothy is a forgery. Well, where's your proof that 2 Timothy is a forgery? Give me the proof. You don't have any. Guarantee you. You refuse to believe God only created two people. It taints God right from beginning. How does it taint God? God creates Adam. We see this in nature. God creates a two of every kind, male and female. Creates Adam, yet there's no Eve. Because during this time in the beginning of the Bible, brings all the animals to Adam and see if he could find a helper comparable to him, and there he could find none. So therefore he puts Adam into a deep sleep, takes a rib from Adam. We don't know if this is from his side or from what. It's a type of a bone. Takes it from Adam, and there we see Eve is formed out of this bone. He says, bones of my bone, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He calls her woman. Look it up. Biblical scholars agree. Man, look, you're telling me where's my evidence and all that stuff. Bring your evidence, man. You tell me Biblical scholars agree that they don't. There's no agreement. I've never heard of any type of agreement. The fact that Timothy is a forgery. There's Thomas, a forgery. Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas is a forgery. So Shakespeare, which is clearly written by man, so does Shakespeare, which is clearly. Yeah, so Shakespeare and the Bible are completely two different types of literary documents. They're not even comparable. Just because one document was written by a man that talks about Romeo and Juliet, for example, we have the Bible written of the history of mankind, and yet we see the same pattern and the wisdom that is gained from this understanding. Really, it centralizes around the main character of the story, which is Jesus, who died for your sins. And this is a man who was prophesied from the very beginning, Genesis 3. We see that there's going to be a redemption from God, and we eventually get there as we read along in Isaiah, we read along in Daniel, we read along in many of the books in the Old Testament. We find out finally when we come to the point in the New Testament, these people, his disciples and others like Paul, was not directly a disciple of Jesus, yet he was an apostle. And we come to the point where these men are documenting what there's people like Mark, Luke, Matthew's documenting what's happening because Matthew's a direct disciple, but Luke is not. Luke is writing an orderly account. There's even outside sources like Josephus and Origen and all these other people, some Roman historians that are writing about this information. You'll say, oh, well, they never said Jesus rose from the dead, all this stuff. Look, if any of these guys had mentioned or they say that Jesus rose from the dead or anything with regards to that, they always say that the disciples claim that he rose from the dead. But if they said the opposite, that would make them a Christian, and they did not want that because otherwise that would mean death for them. That Jesus didn't die for any sins. He died for blasphemy and wanting to overthrow the Roman rule. That is not what happened. You don't know your Bible. You don't know the Bible at all. We have copies of copies, no original manuscripts. Okay, well, it says, no, you said it was transcendent and applies now as it does then. I would say the wisdom of Shakespeare applies better to now than the Bible does. That is wild. That is wild. Read Psalms, read Proverbs. When you read these things, even the other books, you don't have to read just the Psalms and the Proverbs. When you read the other books, they apply directly, and they talk about the condition of the human heart. The condition of the human heart, and Shakespeare does nothing of a sort. And the fact that that the Bible, God really writing this, talks about the condition of the human heart and says that we all fall short of the glory of God. That even our righteousness is as filthy, dirty rags. There's this law that is set before us. There's no laws given in Shakespeare, but we have a law that is given to us. The 10 Commandments is to show us exactly that we cannot possibly even fulfill these to the T, right? No murder, no stealing, no coveting, adultery, honor your mother and your father and your mother. Above all that, shall not take your God's name in vain. You shall not worship any other gods, all this stuff. The only thing in the Bible written by God were the 10 Commandments, and one of those commandments was, thou shalt not murder. Yet God did when he flooded the world. If God can give life, he can also take life. These things that we see in the Bible, we can admit it. We have no understanding as to why God does the things that he does or allows the things that he does. We do know that there's an adversary that is out to get every single human being. His name is Satan, who wants you to get away from God as far as possible by telling you that the Bible is like Harry Potter, or that all this was written by man, so we shouldn't understand about it. We shouldn't even listen. There's lots of writers talk about the condition of the human heart. Even contemporary writers do that. 10 Commandments are bad. Yes, your religion is very immoral. You think it's okay, an innocent person dies for your sins. Human sacrifice is bad, bro. Yeah, except Jesus was God. He is God. And he was the only one that could redeem humanity from our sins. What is the Marxist link you posted? What is the Talmud, and do all synagogues have one? The Talmud is actually a book that the Jews, is it the Talmud or is it the my mind is drawing a blank here. There's another word. There's another book that the Jews follow, and it's more oral tradition. Is that the Talmud? Oral tradition. I'm just trying to go through this. I could look it up here, but oral tradition that the Jews follow, and there's debate within the Talmud. If I'm correct, there's debate within the Talmud talking about things like the virgin birth and all these other things that really aren't. Some of these things don't come to a conclusion. And and do all synagogues have a Talmud? Is that what you're asking? There's different interpretations of what people call like when Jews, the specific types of Jews, whether they're rabbinic messianic Jews, gosh, I'm drawing blanks here. The Messianic Jews, what's the other type of rabbinic Jews? Hasidic Jews, Orthodox Jews. They all have sort of different understandings of what they follow as far as the Tanakh, right? Or the law, right? The first 5 books of the Bible, whether they just follow the first 5 books or whether they follow all of the Old Testament, the prophets, the writings. And then you ask, and yes, this is widely read amongst all Jews, this Talmud. And mostly taught in Judaism schools. And you say, what is the Marxist? So the Marxist link is a link from the congressional record that I was talking about earlier in the stream that talks about the communist goals to take over America. Very, very interesting stuff that we see listed out in that document that talks about ways that they've infiltrated America, or started back in 1960. That was the document, the date that this says in the document. No murder, no stealing. I lost it. Torah. Jesus loved God, so he loved himself. How? Like a narc? Jesus is God the Son, God the Father, and God the Holy Spirit. These are 3 beings in one. So Jesus was loving God the Father. He has the same nature as God. Same nature as God. We can't describe God as like water, right? Water is vapor, liquid, and solid, or egg. It's got the shell, the yolk, and the egg, the egg white. Nothing compares to explain God and the Trinity. The best picture that we have when we see the Trinity The picture of the Trinity is when Jesus is getting baptized. We see Jesus, God the Son. You hear the God the Father saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." We see the Holy Spirit that John witnesses descending upon Jesus Christ. The best picture that we can see of all three of these beings right here at this very moment, manifesting in the physical. Audibly, we hear God the Father. We see God the Son getting baptized. We see the dove descending upon Jesus Christ. Ascetic. Yeah, that's right. Who created nature? Jesus. Yeah, well, we see that in the beginning of the chapter of John. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Nothing was created without. Look up the scripture. 1 John. Let's see here. No, not 1 John. We're looking at John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. He was in the beginning with God. That is referring to Jesus Christ. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. So the Creator came into creation, and the creation did not receive him. Isn't that wild? It's that illustration that we read about in the Bible. It talks about the potter and the clay. And the clay is like, let's see if we can find that passage. Then the word of the Lord came to me, O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter has done, declares the Lord? Behold, like the clay in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel. If at any time I declare concerning a nation or a kingdom that I will pluck, let's see, what does it say? So I went down to the potter's house, and he was working at his wheel, and the vessel he was making was clay, spoiled in the potter's hand, and he reworked it into another vessel, and it seemed good to the potter to do. No, that's not what I'm talking about, but very interesting there. Talks about the clay talking to the Creator. Anyway, see, let's go back here on the comments. It says, Jesus bowed down to God. God would never know to Jesus. Interesting. I don't understand that. Bowed down to God. God would never know to Jesus. Got some typos there, but I don't really understand what you're saying. Something created us, but the Western God is as weak as I and feeble as I am. Yeah, you gotta fix those typos, guys. Anyway, so let's look at the copies of copies here.
Were independent at that time.
Be right back.
Got stuck into one volume, like we think of a Bible today, but copies of the Gospels, of the Acts, of the Psalms, of the prophets floating around the ancient world, so that within a few decades and centuries, you have copies up into Europe, into Asia, and into North Africa, which means that no one person or no one group could have controlled the text at any one point in time. Why? Because if what David Cross said was correct, if you had popes and you had kings and you had scribes who wanted to insert things into the Bible, and they're in Turkey, what are they going to do with all the copies that are in North Africa? What are they going to do with all the copies that are into Central Europe? Well, they'd have to track them down and also alter them. But that would have been impossible. And so because of the history of the Bible, what's called the transmission, no one group or one person could have controlled the text at any one point in time. The objection for the translation doesn't work when we actually look at how we got the Bible. And likewise, the objection that people inserted things in the Bible that they wanted to or took things out also doesn't pan out when we look at how we got the history of the Bible. And not only that, but you might be thinking, okay, we're 2,000 years removed from the most recent books. We're even a few thousand years more removed from, say, some of the books in the Old Testament. So as time goes on, we're obviously getting farther away from the text, right? In one sense, of course. But in another sense, as time goes on, we're not necessarily getting farther from the original text. We're actually getting closer. What do I mean by that? Well, let me pick on the King James Bible for a second. The beloved King James Bible was translated between the years of 1604 and 1611. And it was translated not from manuscripts, those handwritten copies, but from printed editions of the Hebrew Old and Greek New Testaments. And the main printed editions that the King James translators use were based themselves on about 31 manuscripts. I'm talking about the New Testament here. Of the New Testament, the King James translators had 7 printed editions of the Greek New Testament, and those were based on approximately 31 manuscripts. Now, we have today 27 of those 31 manuscripts in our possession. We can go and we can look at them. But we also have 5,000 plus more manuscripts. If you skip ahead to 2023 from 1611, when the King James translation was published, we have...
Pete, you say your last comment was removed. Look, I have no idea. YouTube is removing and, I don't know, retracting comments. I'm not sure if YouTube is doing that or if your just comment was too offensive. I have no moderators, so I don't know. Sorry.
A greater body of evidence that leads us back to the New Testament text and the Old Testament text. Because the earliest manuscript of those 31 that the King James translators had as their kind of underlying base text, the oldest of which was from the 11th century. Today, we have copies that go back to the 2nd century. So as time goes on, as we stick shovels in the ground and we discover manuscripts and we uncover archaeological evidence, we get closer to the time frame to a picture of what the Bible actually said. Now, that doesn't mean that the King James translation is not accurate in that sense. If anything, what we found when we unearthed all those manuscripts is a confirmation that even though the King James translators were using a base text that came from a later period, it was remarkably similar, remarkably accurate. This is not a kind of a dig on the King James Bible, by no means. But what we have when we have modern translations is we're able to get a greater picture of what the original looked like.
So we're going to get out of that ad here, but what he's talking about here is, oh, wrong screen there. When he's talking about here is how people say they have copies of copies and copies and copies and copies and copies and copies and copies. These are modern translations. We actually trace back, when we look at these modern translations, they're looking at the original source text to understand, okay, how can we translate this in a modern day type of word and verbiage? We're not going to use a nonsense language like what the, I don't know, Gen X is kind of language they're using these days. But when we're talking about the fact that these they're not copies of copies of copies, we're talking about transmission, transliteration. Okay? These are two different things. Anyone that watches MSNBC and thinks Fox is any worse is insane. And so we talk about those two different things. These things are very important to understand, that we're not just copying copies. Right? We're looking back at the source text. And this is why modern translations are in some cases a bit better. I think some of the language that is being used loses the sort of deeper meaning. I think King James and Elizabeth does a really good job. The KJV does a really good job in keeping the sort of weight behind the words, but yet we have old words that we don't use anymore, especially the thous and the thus, and this is why so many people get confused by that. We have the ESV, which is a modernized version, way easier to read. The New King James Version, also easier to read. The NIV, NASB, probably, I've heard that's close to the Hebrew, but I'm not exactly certain on that one. But anyway, this is so interesting to just look at when we talk about the Bible. That this is not just copies of copies. So anyway, guys, I'm going to call it here. I've had an interesting conversation with all of you, reading your comments. Snoop Doge, goodbye. Thanks for ignoring all of my messages, Yoke Brain. Yeah, man, I don't know. I wasn't, your messages didn't seem to be, I don't see any of your messages prior, man. Looks like you just joined. I'm not sure. Anyway, otherwise, thanks so much for joining, guys, this podcast. You guys have been wild in this chat. And I love that. I love the fact that you guys have been wild in this chat. Thanks for being here. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for joining me on the stream. There has been so many of you that disagreed with everything that I've been talking about, and that is totally fine. This is what we're here to talk and to debate and to just conversate about all of this stuff. Even if you think I'm a, I don't know, idiot, or think I don't know anything, or whatever, I don't know, or just regurgitating nonsense. Whatever the case is, thanks so much for being here, guys. You guys are awesome. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. See ya.